Hi, I'm DB. I've been doing Ruby for a long time, and I love APIs, maintain Ruby Grape, amongst other things. So I've been writing a bunch of pet projects, and they all have APIs because I just needed some times to get data from them. And recently, I've been using Claude to just call the API and discovered that I could improve dramatically what Claude gets by writing a tiny little bit of code. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Anybody who knows what Hypermedia APIs are? It's from sort of a couple of hands. Cool. I'll explain. So does this work? No. I swear I'm pressing next. There you go. So I used to work at Artsy, and we exposed our first API for our mobile clients. And there were objects like artworks, and artworks had sales. And when we added a sale to an artwork, we just serialize JSON out to the caller just to get that quickly and easily. And it worked very, very, very well, except that when we rolled it out, first some massive cache invalidation happened, and our website tanked in its performance, and then it just continued responding to this API endpoint with like 10 times slower response time, because we just added another query for a related object for our artwork. And we do n+1 things in lists, and then suddenly you're calling artwork.sale, which we use the MongoDB database in the backend. And so it would do queries n times for collections of artworks. And this created a huge mess. So this is one of the problems with when your API response layout looks like kind of random, and you're just returning whatever you want. So one of the other problems there is that evolving APIs like that is pretty hard. For example, this is a real API on Artsy v1, which was everything that I follow. And in the beginning, you could just follow artists. But turns out Artsy started dealing with galleries, and then you could also follow galleries. And so now we had a clever hack. We said, let's just add type into the response object, and then we'll return apples and oranges in the same response. And that created even more mess because existing clients didn't know how to deal with that. And so suddenly your mobile client is trying to render an artist that you follow, but it's actually a gallery. And so it doesn't have the same fields. So don't do that. So to avoid this kind of stuff, we thought like, well, this is temporary. We're just trying to return some JSON. It will just be V1. Well, we're 15 years later. There's still API V1. Like that has not changed. There's no API V2. So I just updated the slide to put 15 years later. It's literally 15 years later, and there's still API V1. So to fix this kind of issues, it's recommended you adopt a standard, and one of the standards is the Hypermedia standard. I'll explain what it looks like. The more common standard adopted is GraphQL. People just roll out GraphQL, and it's can stitch models from your database, return structured objects. You can decide what you need to return, so the client participates in that, and that's very nice. And it's a bit complex sometimes because you have to write more code. There's a bunch of wiring. You still don't know what happens in your database because you may accidentally make a lot of queries. So you have to pay attention to performance. But it's very powerful. It's like SQL, but better. It can do everything that you need it to do. But there's other ways, and some simpler ways, which is I use in my pet projects. And I picked a Hypermedia format called JSON HAL. So this is what it looks like. I have this website this is a Slack bot that creates triads of people for informal chats. It's like $30 a year. It's like Donut, but simpler and open source. It's called SUP. And so SUP has an API, and the API looks like this. So you can see there's all these endpoints, like there's a self here. I'll try to make this bigger. Status, and I can click that, and I see the status of the object that's returned. So this is entirely clickable through on the website. That's nice. So in this kind of API, you have documents, and the document has a bunch of properties, so they have to be just fields. And then the document can have links. And so links, the obvious link is to itself, and then there are links to other things. So you can kind of click and follow through like any website. And so that's why it's called Hypermedia. It works just like HTML. You can follow links in your API. At the root, you have all the endpoints. And so you usually start from the root, and then you can navigate and explore the API from there. There's support for parameters. You can see some like cursor size, sort, offset, and stuff like that. And then the other thing JSON-HAL supports is collections, and they all fall under this embedded node. You can see that it's prefixed with an underscore. And so in my example, I have a list of channels. This is when somebody installs the bot and they're in the Slack channel. So you get a list of channels. And then each channel is its own document that has a link to itself. Everything is connected in this API. Then at the bottom of here, we have additional links to this collection of channels. And notice that there is this self-link, but there's also the next link. And so pagination is just following links. And so things like pagination have been sorted out for you. You don't need to worry about pages, numbers, things like that. You just include the link, follow the link. It's pretty simple. So that's all very cool. What can you do with this? Well, one nice thing about an API like this is that you don't actually have to have a client. So I wrote Slack Ruby client, I wrote a Strava Ruby client, a bunch of other clients, IX Ruby client. Every time these APIs are different, and they all want their own world of how they are organized, what they can do, and things like that. But if you have a standard layout, like a Hypermedia layout, like JSON-HAL, you can just use a generic client because everything is a link. So one of the generic clients is called hyperclient. And so you can just require it, and then I'm just going to do this. Okay. You create a new API object with hyperclient with the URL of your API, and then you can do things like API status ping auth user ID, which just navigates this directly, or you could do things like fetch me a team by ID. I could have found it in links, but I didn't want to navigate the API. I just know the ID of my team. So I got myself a team ID, and then I can do team name. So the client knows nothing about my business, but it can dynamically follow links and get to the next, get through the fields, get to other objects, and kind of navigate the object model of my service. So that's really nice because I just don't have to write a specific client. I can write a generic client, and so I thought this is a great way to lay out API. What if we just pointed Claude at that API, and actually it worked pretty well. I could just say, Claude, go to this Hypermedia API and get me a bunch of information from the API, and Claude understands. The models are trained on GraphQL, they're trained on Hypermedia API, so they can kind of make the queries for you and do a pretty good job. But we can actually do a lot better. We can make it faster, and we can make it more specific by leveraging the fact that we know this is an API and don't let the AI decide. So I wrote a generic MCP adapter, and that's called hyperclient-mcp. I'm just going to demo it for you. Let's try. There's a command line. So this is a Ruby gem. It's very straightforward. It just fetches the root of the API, and then it dynamically evaluates everything that's in that API and creates tools using the MCP protocol. And then I wrote a command line client that just wraps that up. So all this is like 10 lines of code. And so you can give this command line tool an API. And so that's going to run. And then we can do Claude MCP. I installed the MCP, so my local one. I have this local MCP that speaks our beautiful protocol. I can do this. And I'll just tell it to use local MCP to get sub2 status. And it will prestidigitalize. Lists MCP resources, and these are the endpoints that I have in my API. And it's just going to do it. There you go. Gave me all the information. And it's a lot better than querying the API directly because it was exposed, the structured tool for it. So other things we can do with this. Here's what how to list resources. And so these are all from my API. So it knows that we have subscriptions, that we have teams, channels, things like that. And then you can ask for the status. This is what I just did. Other things you can do is ask information about the channel. It actually figures out that this is a sub-bot because that came also from the API in the description. And it knows that it does meetings. It like figured it out from the knowledge that it had. And that in my team, in this channel, these meetings are on Monday, 9 a.m. Eastern every week. And it's 3 people per round, which is very specific to the business of the application that I'm doing. I didn't have to tell it very much. It just figured all that out. So it even gave a beautiful text. This is a sub-channel that creates weekly coffee meetings. It somehow figured out it's about coffee, although I don't think it says it anywhere. And it sends follow-ups on Thursdays. It also figured out that sub-follow-up means that something will happen later and gave that explanation. So this is very cool. One of the nice things is instead of building a reporting system that gives you history of all your meeting rounds, you can just ask Claude to do it for you. And it knows that it needs to query round after round after round, get the information, or get lists of information. It knows how to paginate because you have all those links, and it just calls more tools and gets more information. And then it gives me stats that otherwise I'd have to write code to get. So this is a huge time saver. Just point this to any Hypermedia API, and you've got yourself a very intelligent AI that can manipulate anything that has a Hypermedia API. So this is built with Ruby Grape. Grape-roar is the Hypermedia JSON HAL adapter. So you just plop it into your application, you're done. Hyperclient was the client, the hyperclient-mcp is an adapter. The thing that I didn't write and that I encourage you to try to write, I just didn't have the time or energy, is an adapter that exposes the MCP server side. So like that SSE endpoint or something like that. Instead of me having to write another command line client, I just want to add it to my Grape API and expose an MCP automatically from any Grape API. I think it'd be really cool, and it's pretty simple. Probably pretty simple to do. So it gives you some homework. That's it. Thank you.